Greetings. I'm Chris Anderson. I'm one of the staff team at Girl Scouts Heart of Michigan. And I am guessing at least a few of you know that May is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. That's the month that we celebrate the contributions, the many contributions that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have made to the history and culture of the United States. Now we'll take a look at some of those contributions, and we'll talk about a few activities that you can do to learn a little bit more about this month. But first, let's take a quick look at a timeline that shows how this month came to be designated as Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Now you can see from the dates on this timeline that it took a while to move from a week of celebration to a full month. 14 years to be exact. I'm glad our Congress people were persistent. Now, maybe some of you are wondering, why May? There are a lot of other months on the calendar. Well, the reason is actually centered on a couple of important events in Asian American history. The two events that led to selecting May were May 7th, and that's the anniversary of the arrival of the first Japanese immigrant to the United States. And the second event is the May 10th completion of the first transcontinental railroad. That was thanks to the labor of 20,000 Chinese workers. Now, Chinese and Japanese people were the first Asians to immigrate to the United States. But today, Asian American and Pacific Islanders living in the United States includes people who are from or who have descended from the Pacific Islands, and that includes Polynesia, Micronesia, and Melanesia, as you can see on the map. And Polynesia does include native Hawaiian folks. From East Asia, which generally, depending on the map you're looking at, includes China, Japan, Mongolia, North Korea and South Korea, and Taiwan. It also includes people from a long list of countries in West Asia, and that's Afghanistan, Bahrain, Jordan, Iran, Iraq, Israel, Kuwait. The list goes on. I'll let you read that yourself. There are still more folks coming from Southeast Asia, as you can see by the number of countries listed under this geographic region. You might be interested to know that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are actually from over 36 countries. And the numbers here that you're seeing on the screen are actually from 2018, and they show that over 23 million Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are part of our U.S. population. And roughly 49% of the Asian American and Pacific Islander population is women. That's almost 11.5 million women. Asians and Pacific Islanders now make up about 5% of the U.S. population and are one of the fastest growing racial groups in the country. But still, Asian Americans, and especially Asian American women, are often stereotyped as meek or unassertive or not depicted as leaders. So today we're going to have a little bit of fun challenging that stereotype. It is quiz time. So what you're going to see are some groups of pictures of Asian American and Pacific Islander women, and you'll get to decide what professional group they're part of. So let's get started. Here's our first group of photos. And now remember, these women are all notable for their work in a particular type of field. Which answer do you think fits the women we just saw? Would it be writing, journalism, and literature, medicine, aeronautics and space exploration, architecture, art and design, or service in government office? Well, if you answered C for aeronautics and space exploration, you're right. Mimi Aung was born in Burma, which is now Myanmar. She's overseeing the building of a helicopter to fly on another planet. The miniature 4-pound solar-powered Mars helicopter is designed to fly for up to 90 seconds and is scheduled to make a flight on Mars this year. The second notable woman is Kapalna Chawla, and she was born in India and became an American astronaut. She held multiple pilot's licenses and degrees, and she made many important research and development contributions. In 1994, she was selected as an astronaut candidate by NASA and eventually joined the team on the Space Shuttle Columbia to operate the shuttle's robotic arm. Chawla was one of 7 crew members, all of whom lost their lives in the tragic explosion of the space shuttle. But before the mission, she did state that it was very important for her to enjoy the work. And if you wanted to do something, it didn't matter where you were ranked or if you were a woman. Our last notable lady is Lian Pham. Lian does describe herself as a spacecraft dressmaker at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. She was born in Vietnam and found a job making lingerie in Los Angeles in the 1970s. Her sewing skills and night classes in soldering and cabling at trade school ultimately led to her to support missions to Mars. That cabling skill alone landed her a job working on terrestrial vehicles and space satellites. Now, here's our next group of notable AAPI women, and again, all notable for work in a particular type of field. Now, when you're trying to decide which field this might be, here's a little hint. You can take the letter C out of the list of possible answers. If you answered B for medicine, you are right. Now, these notable women of medicine include Anandabai Joshi, who sailed from India to New York in 1883. She earned her medical degree at Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania and was, in fact, the first Hindu woman in any country to receive a medical degree. She did return to India, where she was appointed physician in charge of all female wards at Albert Edward Hospital. Our second lady of medicine, Margaret Chung, was the oldest of 11 children in a Chinese immigrant family. She graduated from the University of Southern California Medical School in 1916, and that made her the first American-born Chinese female doctor. Now, during World War II, she also helped establish the women's branch of the Naval Reserves during World War II that helped pave the way for women's integration into the U.S. Armed Forces. And finally, Dr. Catherine Luzuriaga is a board-certified Filipino-American physician and pediatric immunologist. She was actually named one of Time's 100 most influential people in the world in 2013 because she was a member of a team of researchers who orchestrated a breakthrough that, quote-unquote, functionally cures newborns of AIDS when it's transmitted to them from their mother. She's been at the forefront of pediatric HIV/AIDS research throughout her career and has received a Scholar Award and the Elizabeth Glaser Scientist Award from the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation. Very impressive. Now, next up, we've increased the size of our group a little here. We have 4 AAPI notable women with a connection through a certain type of work. And to add to our earlier hint, once we identify a field, we won't use that category for the quiz again. Now, this group of women have all made strides using the written word, so if you guessed A, you're right. These women include Kiana Davenport, who is an American author of part Hawaiian ancestry. She's the author of some critically acclaimed novels, including Shark Dialogues and Song of the Exile. Both of those books explore aspects of life as a Polynesian in Western society. Her novels have been translated into 14 languages, and she's won a writing fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts. Lani Went Young is an international best-selling author of young adult fantasy, contemporary romance, and literary fiction. Wow. She was named 2018 Pacific Laureate, and her work is inspired by the diverse mythology of Oceania and the richness of her own cultural heritage as a Samoan and Maori woman. Amy Tan may be a name that's a little more familiar to some of you because of her best-selling book, The Joy Luck Club, which was made into a movie a few years ago. Amy was also a co-producer and co-screenwriter for that film. Now, unlike Kiana, Lani, and Amy, Chinese-American Iris Chang was a journalist. She was the author of historical books and a political activist. She's best known for her best-selling 1997 account of the Nanking Massacre and a book called The Chinese in America, A Narrative History, which was published in 2003. And another group of notable women. Can you guess which field category these ladies might be a part of? Oh, by the way, no hints on this one. Now, if you chose the letter D, you're right. Some of you might recognize Maya Lin's name because it's attached to one of the most famous monuments in the United States. When Maya was only 21 and completing her undergraduate degree at Yale, she submitted the winning design for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., beating out 27,000 other applicants. Now, Maya does cite nature as one of her biggest inspirations, and she said she wanted the memorial to look like a scar or open wound on the land from an aerial perspective. She also designed a monument dedicated to the civil rights movement for the Southern Poverty Law Center in Montgomery, Alabama, and the women's table at Yale University, commemorating the role women played at the university. Nina Akamu might also be somebody you know from her work. Now, her family moved from Oklahoma to Japan when she was 10, and she spent a lot of free time riding horses. And that built her curiosity and respect and love of horses and other animals. And when she graduated from the Maryland Institute College, she had, in her last year there, discovered sculpture, and that immediately became her passion. So she did a lot of studying of Leonardo da Vinci's drawings and manuscripts, and she used that to create Leonardo's horse. Leonardo's horse is 2.5 stories high. The first Leonardo's horse was dedicated in Milan, and the second sculpture of the horse was dedicated at Meyer Sculptural Gardens in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So if y'all are looking for a day trip, go take a look at Leonardo's horse. Helen Lu Fong, our last architect in this group, created several iconic Los Angeles landmarks in her signature Googie, Googie, Googie style of architecture, which is a futuristic Jetsons-like school of design, and that became very popular in Southern California after World War II. Now, Helen was born in Chinatown to a family with 5 children, but she knew by the age of 12 she was going to be an architect. And after she graduated from the University of California, Berkeley, she proved herself to be a very visionary artist and invaluable asset to her architectural firm. And since Googie architecture was predominantly for public architecture, for things like diners and coffee shops and delis, you won't be able to buy a house that was constructed by Helen. But if you've lived in or visited Los Angeles, you've probably eaten at one of her establishments, one of the establishments she designed. Our final group of notable AAPI women. Which field do you think these folks have in common? Again, no hints. Well, I hope you all picked the letter E, because all these women have been committed public servants. Patsy Matsu Takamoto Mink, or Patsy Mink for short, is a Hawaiian-born third-generation Japanese American. Now, she was denied the ability to take the bar. She was studying to be an attorney, but she was married and having a child, and that was believed to make her ineligible back in 1952. So she challenged that statute and she won. She passed the bar and opened her own office in Chicago. And most notably, she ran for a seat in the House of Representatives and won, and she became the first Japanese American and woman of color to serve in the House of Representatives. That was back in 1956. Elaine Chao was born in Taiwan and immigrated to the United States at the age of 8. And since the time of the Reagan administration, she served in a variety of government roles, and in 2001 she became the first Asian American to hold a cabinet post when President George W. Bush appointed her as Secretary of Labor. Most recently, Elaine was appointed to the position of Secretary of Transportation in the Trump administration. And I'm betting you all recognize this last notable Asian American Pacific Islander. And that is, of course, Vice President Kamala Harris, who became the first woman, first African American woman, the first Indian American, first person of Asian American descent, and the first graduate of an historically black college or university to be sworn in as the Vice President of the United States of America. As she said in her acceptance speech, she may not be the first, but she will not be the last. Guess what? We have a bonus question. Do you know what these Asian American women have in common? I'll bet at least a few of you will get this. Now, a little bit of background might be helpful. Lisa Ling has had a wide-ranging career as a television journalist and talk show host. She's reported from numerous countries, served as a war correspondent, and was co-host of an Emmy-nominated or the Emmy-nominated talk show, The View. Tammy Duckworth is a retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel, and she broke many barriers when she launched her political career, because she was the first Asian American elected to Congress in Illinois. She was the first disabled woman in Congress and the first member of Congress from Thailand. The answer? They are both former Girl Scouts. Now I'm going to get a little serious for a minute here. And looking at our Girl Scout law, we know that we're ready to be sisters to every Girl Scout. We want to make sure that Girl Scouts is the place where all girls feel like they belong. I hope you all have the chance to be a part of a Girl Scout troop or group where you can be sisters to some of our Asian American and Pacific Islander Girl Scouts, just like these girls. And FYI, the young lady on the right is a distinguished Girl Scout alumni. Sadhana Anantha realized following the 2014 Ebola outbreak in West Africa that many kids weren't able to see the connection between science and global issues. So to help educate them, she worked with the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences and created a lab simulation that introduces kids to clinical science. Her simulation is now a recurring exhibition at that museum. Thanks for taking our quiz. I'm going to leave you with a few more ideas on what you can do to celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And those are listed on the screen. Don't forget to share them with your Girl Scout sisters. Finally, if you're looking for a more visible reminder of what you've learned during this month, you might want to head over to GSHOM's S'more Council shop for a patch like one of these. Well, thanks as always for watching, and we hope you enjoy celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month.